Welcome back. A triangular shape is a good style to have as part of your repertoire. It's a design style that is inaccessible to lathes, and most buyers will be surprised with this distinctive shape. With the right approach, these are straightforward to design and to execute. Let's look at how this is done, starting with a bowl blank that seemed to call to me to use this design. This log was chosen in part due to its irregular white edge. I could realize 14-inch sides on my equilateral triangle and have each point of the triangle end on white wood. The irregularity of the log's side is an advantage as it permitted a wide convex arc between those ends. Again, this illustrates that the features of each log will suggest different design opportunities. So let's look at how to precisely and reliably design a triangular bowl from this log. You will see, as with all the other different bowl design projects that I have illustrating in this set of presentations, simple geometric concepts make it easy to design a triangular bowl. Let's start with an animation to illustrate the process and then show some of the steps on the log. Envision this as the flat parallel bowl blank. Drawing the triangle is straightforward, but may take a couple of iterations to get the orientation right to both maximize the use of the log and capture its best features. In this presentation, we're simply going to make an equilateral triangle based on your estimate of the best length of the sides. We start by choosing where to draw your line, number 1. Note that your line will specify 2 handle locations, one at each end of that line. Finding the third corner simply requires using a protractor extended to the length of your first line and draw an arc from each end of line 1, roughly where you expect them to intersect. The actual intersection of those 2 arcs will be the location of the third handle. This process will be exactly the same for both design stages, prior to rough carving and preparing for finish carving. However, there may have to be some dimensional changes after drawing depending on the warpage. We now need to convert the simple drawn triangle into our bowl's desired shape. My preference is for the triangular bowls to have convex sides and to have the handles be bounded by the tips of the triangle. This is straightforward. First, I draw the handles with a small circle from my inventory, anchored at the triangle's tip, and make sure that the 2 points where the small circles create intersection on the triangle's sides are at equal distance from the adjoining tip. I then select a larger arc, which will allow me to connect those marked points on each side. Finally, I create the transitions from the newly drawn rim to the new handles by selecting another arc to tangentially connect them to smoothly guide the eye from one arc to the other. Our last step on the top will be to define the bowl's midpoints between the handles, which we will later extend to the bottom. These are easily found by measuring and then marking the midpoint on each side of your triangle. We will then draw a line connecting each of the triangle's 3 corner points to the newly marked midpoint of the triangle's opposite side. Extended outward from these midpoints, the line will connect with the rim at a point that is midway between the handles. Extended downward, these 3 rim points will define the orientation of the bowl's bottom. To start this final step, I first trim down the log to a size nearer to the bowl's dimensions. Because you start with the top and bottom flat and parallel, a simple carpentry square will allow you to accurately drop the top center lines to the bottom. On the left, you can see the top view with the key top lines. On the bottom view, on the right, we have extended those midlines and drawn them down towards their point of intersection. This is the center of the bottom of the bowl. Note at this stage, with the roughness of the typical bowl blank, there may be some minor imprecision in your efforts to define the bowl's precise center. However, remember, this is going to be redesigned when the bowl is dry, and we will carve well wide of our design lines during this wet carving stage. At this point, the size, the location, geometric shape for the feet is entirely personal choice. Here I wanted to create cone-shaped feet with a circular end. They will extend inward toward the bowl's center only a short distance from each foot. The lines extending from the center to the outer edges of each foot then guide the design of these cone-shaped foot extension their short distance towards the foot. The drawn lines ensure that all aspects of the feet remain oriented to the bowl's center. One final caveat is that remember, this is wet carving, and as before, you are rough carving towards, but not to these lines. Here's the result of creating the triangle. I added the handles with the inside of the small circle, the rim with the larger circle, and the transitions to the handles with the inside of the largest circle. Here's the bowl carved to depth. Recognize the added carving line well inside the design line to establish my closest approach to the design line for internal digging at this stage. When I rough carve the bowl on its outside, my carving distance will be a bit less, but still well wide. The difference is I don't have to leave room for the rim that sits only inside the design line. The final rim of the dry bowl, as it gets finished 12 months after this photo, will then be a comparatively narrow band closer to the inside of the design line. The blank with the inside carved out and each end of the top's 3 center lines marked on the edges has now been flipped over. Here, the carpentry square is being used to transfer the center lines to the bowl's parallel bottom. The lines have now been extended across the bottom of the bowl to find their intersection at the bowl's center. These feet can be seen as faintly marked curved rectangles placed and measured from the center, exactly as in the animations. I place the feet at a distance commensurate with the width of the carved bowl's internal bottom. The goal is to have the feet be wide enough to have the bowl be stable and narrow enough to complement the shape of the bowl. You can see the results of the carving process, including the white handles and the centered feet. Other key decisions included how to transition the descending outside of the bowl to the exposed feet and how tall to make the feet. Over the years, I've made several triangular bowls. There are pieces of wood that just simply do not seem suited to long or wide bowls, where the idiosyncrasies of triangularity can offer opportunity. Once I figured out a way to reliably design these bowls to fit both the wet and the dry carving stages, it's been a fun addition to my repertoire. The next chapter in this series is how to design a rectangular bowl.